podcast show for business owners and managers who are passionate about developing people and growing a successful business. And now here's your host, Alistair Booth from the HR Booth.
Welcome to our latest episode. So delighted to be joined by one of our HR consultants, Claire Brook. So slightly different format from today. What we're going to be doing is doing a wee kind of Q&A with Claire, and just to hear some insights from Claire. We're just chatting off camera, and we did something similar maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 or 3
and that
years
was
ago, yeah.
maybe actually 3. Time flies, because it's been a wee while now.
I was 1 year then when we did
That's
it.
right. Well, time flies. So thanks for tuning in. So what we're going to do today is get kind of stuck right in. Claire's going to kind of share a little bit about some of the stuff that she does with the HR Booth, one kind of particular topic that comes up quite a bit with some of her clients. So Claire's going to give an insight into that. But before we kind of get stuck into that bit, just want to ask you a wee bit about your journey so far with the HR Booth, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with the audience.
Yeah, so I started with the HR Booth just around about 4 years ago. Just part-time role, developed from doing initially the Kickstart as I came in, temporary for Kickstart, and then kind of evolved for there into the consultancy role, had a wee bit of management, a couple of members of the team, and then back into the main consultancy bit. So yeah, it's been good.
Time's flown by.
Really
about the Kickstart scheme. That was on COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. It feels like ages ago, but maybe not so much.
I know. Aye, okay, good. Well, thanks for sharing that. And what is it you kind of enjoy about the HR Booth then, Claire?
I really enjoy the variation. So as well as like the working for the company and the team and everything, it's the variation of the job. Like every time we see no 2 days are the same, that's absolutely true. Like you don't always know what you're coming into, which is always great. And also being part of HR consultancy, you feel wanted. Like when you've been in-house HR, everybody you're seen as like a budget constraint. But I think with our clients, they genuinely need and want your help. So that's a really good feeling, and being able to just come away and feel like, I've actually made a difference for that person. It's really good. So,
good stuff. That's good to hear. Thanks for sharing that then, Claire. So we'll get stuck right into the topic. So today we're going to be speaking all about redundancy, and it's a topic that we advise on quite a bit as a business. It comes up, even when there's the economic climate might be quite positive for a lot of businesses. Even some businesses might need to make job cuts for different reasons, but we're seeing a wee bit more of that in kind of recent weeks. So I thought it'd be a good topic to kind of to share.
Absolutely.
I know it's something that you do a lot with our clients, Claire, so we're just going to get kind of stuck into that. So would you mind kind of just sharing a little bit around, where employers, I guess, should start with when it comes to considering selecting employees for redundancy? What sort of things they need to think about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is you need to actually consider why you're doing it. So is it a genuine redundancy, or is it the first alternative that you've thought of to maybe doing a performance management, or if there's a disciplinary issue? So you definitely need to consider, because if it's going to have quite an impact on your business, and send kind of ruffles throughout the business. So it really has to be genuine. You might want to discuss, what you would want to do is obviously discuss it with your senior team, or have some documentation to say that we've discussed this is the reasons for it, whether it be financial or just purely to downsize, in terms of your people and streamline your processes maybe. So those, I say, were the most important things. Where they're having to reduce the workforce, you need to really look at the roles that you need, and not the people. So it could be that you've got a lot of people doing the same role, but maybe on different job titles. So you really need to focus on, going forward, what do I need in my business? What's key for my business? And then what are the specific job roles that are being performed that are maybe not as key for me, and what I need to look at as well. And just a few other things like, are there other vacancies? Have we looked at alternatives before we actually go down the route of redundancy? So it could be some of our clients have done a short-term working for a wee while, maybe looked at shift changes, a shorter working week. I'm trying to think what else, shift changes, and reduced hours and maybe redeployment profile as well. So if there's like a few, redundancy isn't always the only option. There are other things that we can look at as well. And I certainly think before you even start the process, seek advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there could be things, you're so streamlined into your process and your business that it could be like someone like us comes in and goes, actually, have you considered these options? Or actually, I know you want to put these roles at risk of redundancy, but there's a similar a similar role being performed in a different town or a different city that you need to consider as well. So certainly see those are the main.
Brilliant. Good. Some good bits of advice there. Actually, a couple of things that kind of stuck out a little bit there, Claire, and it's something we see quite a bit. So one you touched on there is a genuine redundancy situation. So quite often, and you'll know this better than me because you're closer to the clients, but quite often we might see a situation where it's a performance issue and the manager maybe doesn't want to tackle that, don't want to have that difficult conversation, so they try to kind of maybe dress it up in such a way it's a redundancy, and it's not. So it's quite good that you'll ask these types of questions and make sure we don't go down that route. That's something we see quite a bit. Another one you touched on there that I quite liked was around having like kind of notes from a kind of management meeting or a board meeting, and I do recall probably a couple of years ago, actually, we were asked to give evidence at a tribunal for a case that we supported. Wasn't one that you were involved with, but I think we maybe shared details of the case at a team meeting. And one of the things that had come about was the individual had raised an unfair dismissal claim, and we're kind of trying to say it was because of another reason, that something had happened in the business, and that was why the redundancy had come about. But what was able to be produced at the tribunal was actually documented minutes from a number of months before, where the business had made a business decision that if certain things in the business didn't happen over a period of time in terms of revenue, different contracts coming on board, that they'd be faced with a redundancy situation. And the judge actually commented on that at the actual hearing. So that part was thrown in. So it's good advice to give to a client around that, is to make sure that is kind of documented before they get into this stage. So that was quite like you kind of saying that, which is good. Is there anything else? So what about maybe like the legal requirements that employers must kind of think about when selecting employees for redundancy? Anything like that you want to share?
So in terms of legal requirements, depending on the amount of people you actually or the amount of people, job roles that are going to be affected, will determine certain reporting requirements. So if there's over a certain amount, you might need to complete a HR1 form. That's to basically notify the government about these redundancies potentially being made, and then also obviously following the consultation process as well. It is a legal requirement, so it's making sure that we can demonstrate that's been reasonably done as well. And the thing is as well, making sure that in terms of finances there is a payment made to the people. So when you're looking at what am I going to do with my business and financially what are we looking at, that is definitely something that needs to be taken into account as well.
Brilliant, good. And obviously HR1 form applies at the minute if it's 20 or more employees in an establishment. We know there's going to be some changes to legislation coming around that, but I guess that HR1 form, you touched on it earlier actually, around seeking advice. So that's certainly something that we can help with, but obviously if a business needs some support, definitely kind of seek some advice and make sure they follow that process.
Absolutely.
Good. And in terms of, I suppose, getting into the selection kind of process, so you've touched on consultation there, and that might vary depending on the size of the business. Once you've kind of got through the kind of consultation period, as part of that, then redundancy selection is something that comes up quite a bit around the criteria. So is there anything around that businesses should consider?
Definitely. I mean, the main things that are used are absence record, performance, disciplinary, timekeeping, so that could be time and attendance system and things. The main thing we would recommend is that you use things that you can that are documented and that you can demonstrate have been used to do a reasonable selection. Because sometimes, when we're having conversations with clients, they might be like, oh, their attitude isn't as good, or they're not as enthusiastic, and it's like, that's really fluid. So that's really hard to, if you were challenged on it in a tribunal, that's very hard to be able to demonstrate that. Whereas if you've got the documentation, the hard evidence, if you like, then it's a lot harder for that to be that to be challenged.
Yeah, good.
In terms of like, it probably mainly applies to maybe production, but if there's things like quality errors, do you know, or even in sort of, you know, financial businesses and our business as well, do you know, if there's quality errors and things, those are documented as well. And if you've used those as a scoring criteria, you can actually, again, demonstrate in comparison to other people, you know, you've maybe had more errors. So it is, for me, that is probably the best way to do it and the best things to use. I think before we'd spoken about things like age as well, that's not necessarily, age and length of service isn't something that really gets looked upon now, just because it could be a discriminating factor. And then also first out. You know, we used to like absolutely
to call it.
Absolutely, like that doesn't count anymore either. So but definitely documented evidence is the best thing.
Good. And that touches a really good point, actually, because so often businesses won't, you know, do one-to-ones or give feedback on performance, and then it's only when something like this comes about that they then kind of know. They'll maybe say to us, well, Jimmy's an underperformer, he's got to go, but there's no evidence to support it. You've never actually had any discussions with Jimmy, so he might not know he's an underperformer, so how are you going to kind of measure that? So I think it does kind of highlight the importance of documented one-to-ones, and that might be done on a quarterly basis. Some companies do it more regular, but definitely having something in place gives you to support that. Definitely.
And return to works as well. I think, you know, I was thinking about this yesterday, is in terms of return to works, like a lot of employers are like, oh, you know, what is the purpose in them? But what you will find is when you need to call on that documentation, if there's any, you know, disabilities or mental health issues or anything, that those are, you know, at the time it might not seem important, but when it comes to these processes, like you said, it's very important.
And that's probably why around, you know, you mentioned there about attendance being a criteria, but you might have a situation where someone does have a disability or the absences might be pregnancy related. To avoid any discrimination, then what you would be doing is then, I suppose, is discounting maybe some of these absences to demonstrate you followed a reasonable adjustment. But if the paper trail's not there, how do you do that?
How do you know? Exactly.
Good. Right, brilliant, good. And is there any kind of groups of employees that require like special consideration during like the kind of redundancy process at all?
Just kind of like we touched on there just now, Ali, you know, people who you are aware of that have some disability or maybe an associated disability. And, you know, and just exactly like you said, Alistair, you know, where there's been absences, if you've got them documented, then you can discount anything that is directly related to the disability. You should also take into consideration if there are reasonable adjustments in place. So if you have them in place in the workforce, they shouldn't actually have any impact on any scoring that you do, because they're obviously in place for a reason. 9 times out of 10, that reason is disability related. So, you know, if someone can only work 4 days a week and someone can work 5 days, you wouldn't score them down because they can only work 4. Obviously, if it's related to a reasonable adjustment. So those are the types of things you would want to definitely take into consideration.
Good advice. We've touched on the documentation already, so things like return to work interviews, absence records, performance records, that type of thing. Is there anything else that would be helpful around documentation should be challenged later on, perhaps?
I would say, you know, things like disciplinary as well, but one of the main things I would probably but only because I've got kind of experience of this, but it was in a 2P case. However, we went to tribunal with this particular employer. This is a previous employer. And the employment judge had said that the person had not, during the consultation process for 2P, the person hadn't actually challenged it. So there was no record of the challenge being made, but then obviously she challenged it to go to tribunal. Now, I would suggest that the same rule apply for redundancy. So when you're going through the redundancy process with someone, you have a form, you document the conversation that's taken place, you document any challenges or issues that they've had, and those documents can serve you in good stead going forward. If someone was to come back and say my redundancy was unfair, you didn't explain this to me, and it definitely made a massive difference within that case. And I think it would, you know, definitely apply in any sort of consultation case, to be honest, but particularly in redundancy, because it could be someone says, oh, you knew about my disability, and you're like, well, actually there's absolutely no documentation or nothing discussed during the consultation about a disability. How would I know? So even something as simple as that can be really good. So just
brilliant. And So it's a very difficult time, not just for the business, but more importantly for the people that are going through that redundancy kind of process. And then obviously the ones that then are selected for redundancy, that is a very difficult kind of situation. So is there any advice that you could give employers around that, how to support their people during this process?
Yeah, definitely. If you've got an employee assistance programme, always definitely refer them onto that, because there could be like certain issues that they're suffering from that they might want to speak to someone, whether it's projected financial issues or anything. If you have a union, always engage with them during the process, and the union can actually help you to support people. They've maybe got contacts as well, and also putting them, even from a HR perspective, putting them in touch with the HR person, say we can review your CV, we can put you in touch with an agency, we can help you, we could take you through a kind of workshop on how to fill out application forms and use Indeed, all that type of stuff, obviously depending on the demographic of your workforce as well. But yeah, just provide as much support you can, especially internal support, where someone could take the time to review CVs and give feedback and help with covering letters and things like that. I would definitely suggest that.
Yeah, good advice. I think we've seen this quite a bit through the HR booth and probably your previous roles, Claire, but quite often someone's maybe been made redundant and that's the only job they might have had for 25 or 30 years. So if you actually say to them, you need to apply online, they'd probably be, I got a because my dad or my uncle or something, or family member don't have a CV, exactly, wouldn't know where to start maybe applying for jobs online, never been for an interview for 30 years, so what sort of things to consider. So I think that outplacement support is really important, and I suppose it ends the relationship on a little bit of a kind of nice foot in around that you've looked after them and made sure they're in a good place for the future. So yeah, good advice.
And even references, making sure they've got a reference to take with them, so so they're not stressing about trying to get that when they're applying for a job. Something as simple as that can make a really big difference.
Good. And is there anything else, like obviously you might be kind of dealing with like a specific selection pool within the company? Is there anything that should be communicated to the wider workforce as part of that as well? Because quite often they might be a wee bit nervous as well, maybe hearing that something's going on in another department or a different part of the business. Any advice on that at all?
Yeah, I would suggest that obviously you communicate to your initial group that are being placed at risk, and then once the process has come to a conclusion, I would certainly suggest like it's some form of company announcement to go out to say, we've now concluded the process and what your kind of thoughts are going forward, whether it's we don't envisage having to go through this again, or just basic communication is definitely key as part of a redundancy process. And that's not, like you say, it's not just the people who are directly affected, it's the ones that are with that, because it will send ripples throughout your company. And people were maybe already teetering, might lose good people.
Exactly, because they might be a wee bit nervous around what could happen for them. So yeah, good advice. Great. Well, that's all my questions on redundancy. So thanks for sharing that. And I know that our audience will definitely appreciate that. So if you've got any questions on anything regarding redundancy or any other HR related topic, you can kind of reach out to the HR booth via the website. So www.thehrbooth.co.uk, or you can contact us via email, which is info@thehrbooth.co.uk. We'll put some show notes as well into the shows for today, just to cover some of the points that Claire has alluded on, but if there's any questions on that, you can kind of let us know. So redundancy is obviously quite a serious kind of topic, so I think quite important that we try and maybe finish on something a little bit more positive. So is there anything you'd like to share with the audience around what you like to do outside the work?
I think for me, the usual family and friends. Obviously my wee boy keeps me busy, but mostly reading and true crime podcasts. I'm a bit, everybody loves, everybody knows I love a bit of murders.
It's good. And what book are you reading at the minute?
At the moment, I'm reading Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King, who's actually my favourite author. So I'm kind of on a mission to read as many of his books as possible. I've read the old school scale ones, so I'm trying to get into his more modern kind of ones at the moment.
Good. And if you weren't an HR consultant, Claire, what would you be doing?
So the team, actually, we were discussing this the other day. I would love to have been a neonatal nurse, going to nursing, and especially like working with like little babies and stuff. I think but at the time I was very young when I'd considered it, and I probably wasn't emotionally the best decision at the time. But yeah, if I was to re-choose a career, that's what I would choose.
Well, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for your today. I know that'll be very well received by our audience. So thanks, Claire, and thanks again for tuning in, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.